Hello, my name is Hollee Mangrum-Willis, and I am the Deputy Director of One in Tech, ISACA's foundation. Thank you for joining us today. Please come on in, get comfortable for this chat that we have for you today. Joining me for this conversation is one of our illustrious panelists. We have with us Jo Stewart-Rattray, who is an incredible champion for One in Tech. And more specifically, she leads tech, a program I'm sure a lot of our ISACA audience and friends and allies are familiar with over the years. Not only is she a champion, but she's one of the founders, founding members, and creators of She Leads Tech. So, Joe, thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you, Holly. It's a great pleasure to be here, as always, with you.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we're gonna dig in because we don't want to take everyone's time. We want them to come back for more a little bit later, right? So
Yeah.
I would like to talk to you and base our discussion today around She Leads Tech, and especially we are still in this. As we've been saying, unprecedented times, and there have been some shifts that have occurred, just worldwide, but specifically speaking to She Leads Tech, since you were there at the beginning, since you were there at the inception, can you tell us a little bit about the progress that you've had a front row seat to when it as far as She Leads Tech is concerned?
Oh, absolutely, Holly. And I've got to say, I'm just watching all the people who are coming in to have a listen to us, and we've got them from all over the world. So that's fantastic. Yeah, I
Absolutely.
was in a boardroom in Brussels, Belgium, in 2015 when the portfolios were being given out to the board because I was on the ISACA global board at that point, and all the portfolios were being given out, and my name hadn't been called, and I was going, oh yeah, I get to be an ordinary board member for a year. How cool is this? Well, the next thing I know, it was, and Jo Stewart-Rattray has a brand new portfolio, and that is the Women's Initiative. And that's all I was given, the Women's Initiative, right?
That's it.
Nothing else. Nothing else. So, of course, it was my own fault because I'd been saying we weren't doing anything for our female constituents and we needed to bring more women into the professions that we serve, et cetera, et cetera. So that concerned me, that I had the Women's Initiative and nothing else. So I think it's fair to say that we've moved an incredible way since the Women's Initiative, right? So we kicked it off, and our very first get together was at the very first CSX conference in Washington DC, and so we asked for some people to join us in focus groups to determine if this was a really wanted by our constituency. We thought it was, but was that the case, right? In 15 minutes, those sessions were oversubscribed.
Oh
So
wow.
that was, I know, right? So that was a really clear indication that not only women but male allies were also very keen on this program. So from
Mhm.
that's how we began the role. And as you know, I have had the very great privilege of rolling this program out personally in 16 countries around the world. Initially, and since then many more, and we're now in 180 countries around the world. So I think it's fair to say we've actually moved the needle a long way, and we're becoming far more action oriented now, because in those days we had to ensure that there was an audience, that there was a want for this. So
Mhm.
I think that's the thing. So we have moved a long way.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for that historical, because I'm always a believer that in order to know where you're going, you got to know where you came from, right? So
Correct.
thank
No,
you
you're
for
very.
sharing that. Can you talk specifically about the state of women in cybersecurity in Oceania?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Oceania is an interesting region because we have Australia, New Zealand, and Papua New Guinea. So three very different countries, three
Mm,
very different stages, if you like, of development. Australia and New Zealand very close, but Papua New Guinea is really an emerging nation, so quite a different um, place to be. And so we find that women are still grossly underrepresented in this country in technology. Recent study tells us that if you count every woman who's um, in technology, whether she be in frontline, she a
Mhm.
technologist, or whether she be a receptionist in a technology company, that whole
Mhm.
number is about 23 or 24%. But
Wow.
if you hack that down and you say how many women are actually technologists or security experts, we get down to something like 12, 13, or 14%. So
Wow.
I think it's fair to say that our program is absolutely needed in this part of the world just as much as elsewhere. So, we might have advanced in, certainly since I've been involved in security, we've advanced from me going to a conference with 200 people and being only one or two women there, but we're still only seeing, about 10% of women at conferences in this region as well. So I think it's fair to say that we have still a lot of work to do.
Absolutely. So you touched on this a little bit before, and what I'm getting at is it sounds like more awareness has is needed. The awareness is there that we have a problem. There we go. The awareness is there that we have an issue that needs to be addressed when it comes to gender balance, right? And as
Yes.
you say, especially in Oceania, especially in Papua New Guinea. And one of the things, because I'm new to ISACA, I'm almost 10 months in, and one of the things that was very commendable that I found about She Leads Tech was that the awareness was there. People knew about it. They knew what the core issue was, what they were, and knew, a few tools on how to address that. But that advocacy and that awareness
Mm.
was palpable. Like I could feel it as soon as I walked through the door. And so, part of what we're working on now as One in Tech is is evolving, not moving, is evolving to include action oriented steps. So, can
Correct.
you suggest or talk to us about some crucial elements, some crucial things that are needed to evolve this to the next phase of being action oriented?
I think that's right. I think we have, we've done the studies, we've done the surveys, we know what this is about. And I think one of the things is we are also very much aware that the needs of women in PNG are very different from the needs of women in Australia or New Zealand or indeed
Mm,
Zambia or Kenya, for instance. But what we need to be doing is looking at that pragmatic approach. So we need to be looking at how we get people to be involved as our allies. And champions in the space, because I believe that this is a story for men and women together. I don't believe we can make a difference by ourselves. We actually have to stand shoulder to shoulder to make that difference, and bear the burden together as well. Inclusivity is really important too. It's all very well to say, look, we have 50% women in our, and I had an organisation say recently, we've got 52% women in our organisation. Yes, but are they included in decision making? Where are they on the food chain, right? So, and the answer to that was, oh, because they just thought they ticked a great big box with 51 or 52%. So I
mhm.
think that's the important thing too, is to look at career pathing for women. Really important to get them to that level, because we're sorely underrepresented in this part of the world, in the leadership stakes. Also, advocacy. And I know you and I will probably talk about advocacy at some point, but I think that's a really important thing too, is advocacy at all levels within the organisation, outside the organisation with like-minded professional bodies too, but also with government. These are all things that there's room for us to be doing to help move that needle.
Awesome, awesome. Hello. I just want to acknowledge we have someone in the chat who said that there was a quake in Melbourne. So
Yes,
just
5.8
my
yesterday. Yeah.
word. So I just thoughts and prayers for everyone in Melbourne, and thank you for sharing that. I just wanted to take a moment to say that. Um Now you again, it's amazing to me how this conversation it just naturally flows into the next question, which is about allyship.
Yes.
And I want to speak specifically about because you know as they say, you don't get very far preaching to the choir, right? Like you have to talk to the people who need the message the most and who could best benefit um from employing the message, not just hearing and receiving it, but acting on the message, right?
Yes.
Would you happen to be able to suggest a few nuggets, a few small things? I'm thinking about something that's tangible, attainable. The phrase SMART goals, something just very tangible that the random person who feels that they may be ignorant on the topic or may not have enough voice or power, small things that allies can do to move towards more action, to be impactful, and to champion women and gender balance for all genders in
Yeah.
cybersecurity.
I think it can be as simple. I very much believe that we all have our own sphere of influence. So,
Mm,
what we should really be doing, and this is something for our allies to be thinking about, is about just simply changing it up in your own sphere of influence. And that could be as simple as changing the language. It's
mm,
not, we're manning the front desk. No, no, you're not. You're staffing the front desk.
mm,
Little things like that, where you start to change the language, start to change. It's not manpower, it's staffing power or staffing or resource
mm-hmm,
hours, right? So you start to
mm-hmm.
change the thinking very simply. You start from the most simple place, I believe, and we can all do that. And that's something for our allies to do as well, and to be mindful of how you approach a problem in the workplace too. Are you naturally, by setting this thing to be at 4:30 every afternoon, this particular meeting, are you actually then precluding anybody who has child pickup responsibilities? And that's men and women.
Mm,
But
mm-hmm.
you're suddenly precluding parents. Well, that's not good. That's not good for their particular um, career trajectory either. So I think we have to be very mindful that, to ensure that, because we know that women are still predominantly the caregivers. So we need to make sure that we're not precluding them by the language that we use in the workplace, or indeed to recruit women into these fields as well. That's a really important thing.
So, Joe, you bring up something interesting, and thank you. I appreciate the the nugget about start with your own sphere of
Yeah,
influence. Just something as simple as a language change, and I'll add gently correcting someone else's language, right?
correct.
Gen-
Correct.
Gently. It doesn't have to be overt. It doesn't have to be like, "Hey, you said this wrong." It's just like, why don't we use staffing
Oh,
power instead of
I've just
manpower?
I actually was on a building site a while ago, and somebody talked about the manhole. It's actually now called a trades entry point. So I just said, "Oh, you mean the
Ooh,
trades entry point?" And they went, "Oh, yeah, that's right." So, just a little thing like
yeah,
that. And it wasn't
it's
correcting the
cautious.
person. It was just, saying, "Hi, this is what it is, really."
Yes. It's great. We have a new She Leads Tech champion who is watching today, Melinda Miguel, and we are collaborating on something for Florida coming up soon. But she says it's so amazing to be a part of this tremendous community worldwide, and I couldn't agree more. I mean, I'm looking at the chat, and we've got folks checking in from Canada, from India, the Bahamas, Australia, Atlanta, Arizona, Korea. I mean, just all over the world. And that just tells me that this issue of gender balance in the workplace and gender inclusivity in our digital trust spaces is still not. I don't want to just say that it's an issue, but it's a passion project. There we go. It's a passion project for many folks around the world who just want to see us all do better and be better.
Oh,
And
oh, absolutely.
yeah, and I think that, even in because we are such a digital world now, because the pandemic has demanded that of us, we have begun to see a lot of the disparities just with gender balance alone. Which brings me back to the last question that I have for us tonight. If anyone else wants to volunteer anything else from the chat. But as we talk about, and this actually came from another She Leads Tech champion who messaged me prior to our event, Natalie Perez, and she wanted to know what does She Lead Tech advocacy look like in the pandemic, on the heels of the pandemic as we continue to wade through it. What does that what because you mentioned earlier that women were primary caregivers, and so I can speak in the United States. We're seeing that a lot of women have not returned to work because of childcare issues, or not even just issues, but just pure fear that sending their child to school that is open would be detrimental to their health. So I guess what I'm getting at is as we move towards more action, as we move towards more advocacy, how has the pandemic, or how do you see the pandemic um, better informing our next steps?
It's a very interesting question, Holly. It's a very big question, and there's
Mhm,
a very
mhm.
big answer, but I'm going to try and keep this short. Um, the pandemic has made a huge difference because you're right, women are still predominantly caregivers. In my role on the board of the National Rural Women's Coalition, for instance, we know that it is still women doing up to 20, 30 hours of caregiving in addition per week. So that's unpaid caregiving and domestic duties, right? In addition to their day jobs, and in addition to, in some cases, homeschooling kids, etc. So it's a huge thing, and of course, all of a sudden, women are at home doing all of those things during the
Mhm,
pandemic. The other thing
mhm.
that we've seen is that there is, in some cases, women, it's been a bit of a pink pandemic because women have also been uh, the first to lose their jobs in many cases. So,
Mm,
because of the
mm,
kind of work that they're doing. So, that's been an issue. The other issue is that it has changed family dynamic in many instances as well, right? So, we've seen an increase, unfortunately, in family and domestic violence as a
mm,
result. So, because people
mhm,
are living cheek by jowl, which is something that they're not used to, they need that. And there's no excuse for that kind of interaction, but it has happened.
mhm,
So we've seen a lot of that making a huge difference because of that change in family dynamic. Because maybe the traditional breadwinner is the one who's lost their job as well. So it's really
mhm,
making some real issues. And the other thing I think we've had to learn from this, if we go to a little bit lighter side, is the whole work life balance issue. We have to do something about that for ourselves. You know,
mhm.
I I have sliding doors, pocket doors from my den out into the main living room. And when I hear a particular news theme come on at night, that's it. I close down and get out. I had to do that early on because I was finding myself sneaking back into this room and
Oh,
working
yes,
all the hours that
yes,
God gave me breath, which was ridiculous. So I stopped.
yes.
So I certainly have begun to think differently about my approach to work life balance. Now, I've been working from home since March the 17th last year, and I absolutely love it. Now I've set some parameters and boundaries for myself. Right.
Mhm,
And I think
mhm,
that's the thing that we need to learn. We also need to ensure that our bosses understand that too. That just because you're working at home doesn't mean that you're going to be available 24/7 for them, because you are still
mhm.
only contracted to do 38, 40, whatever, however many hours a week it is. So I think that's the other thing that we need to be very, very aware of, that we may have to have that discussion with the workplace.
Absolutely. So, and if I may kind of paraphrase what you're saying, it seems like some of the social, and I mean that loosely, but some of the social standards that have been set around working, and especially for women, uh, it sounds like a a a good advocacy role would be to for She Leads Tech is to help companies redefine those social parameters when it comes to their jobs. It used to be a time I think about my mother. My mother was a Chicago police officer, and she never understands why I work so much. And I said, "Ma, when you took off your uniform, you were done with work. You worked
Yeah,
from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. and you were done."
yeah,
And, but me, and especially in the dawn of email, my word, and working globally, I could work 24 hours a day if I
yes,
allowed
she
it,
could.
right? And so I think part of that advocacy, like you said, is really helping women advocate for themselves in numbers,
Yes,
because I think the
yes,
the louder the voices, the better. And two, really encouraging employers and managers to walk in someone else's shoes, be more empathetic, right?
yeah.
Understand the social ramifications that have come out of this pandemic, because it's not, everyone talked about that bottom line, right? That dollar, how much money was being spent or saved. Everyone talked, but no one really wants to dig into the social emotional part of it, right? And
You
that's
know,
huge, because if you want to continue productivity, you can't do that with half a fully formed person, right?
no, absolutely, you're absolutely right. But I think that that's a really interesting point that we have to have those discussions because I can
Mhm.
see some of the feed coming through saying, "Oh yeah, they'll call at midnight. Don't answer the phone. You are not employed to be working at midnight." Of course, unless you are, but most of us
Mhm.
are not. So that's just unacceptable, and those boundaries need to be certainly in place. And that is about having a discussion with, again, it goes back to having the discussion with the employer that this is not acceptable, unless it's an emergency.
Absolutely.
I mean, I laugh, I make a joke, being a chief information security officer, I'm always saying that CISOs never sleep. Sleep's highly overrated. So sometimes there will be an emergency and you do have to answer the phone, but 9 times out of 10, no, you do not. And you're right. That's how we can advocate for ourselves, is about understanding what some work-life balance looks like, and the fact
Mhm.
that it can wait. If it's now midnight and you're calling, it can actually wait until 6:30 or 7 in the morning. And the other thing I was going to say about the boundary piece is I've had to make some hard and fast boundaries because, as you know, Holly, I work a lot with the states and in my
Mhm.
ISACA role as much as anything else. And I have to
Mhm.
say that one of the things is I could be taking calls at midnight and then another one at 4 o'clock in the morning without any
Mhm.
any issue. But as you know, I say, no, I'm sorry, I can't do that. Love you all dearly,
Yep.
but I'm not prepared to do that. I actually do need some rest in my day. So my boundary is there's only one person I'll take a call at 5:30 in the morning for, and Holly, I think you have. Actually, there are two. You're one of them. I've taken them at 5:30 for you. Um, but I know that I am completely useless when it comes to about 11:30 at night, unlike you. So I know that there's no point me trying to do anything from 11:30 until 5
Mhm.
a.m. So I've
Mhm.
set that boundary, and I think it's incumbent upon each of us to do that. And it's all right. Think about what our male colleagues would do. They would have no compunction in doing that. So we need to act on that for ourselves and say, well, no, we need to have that me time.
Absolutely. Joe, I hate that we have to cut this short, but I'm actually glad, because that'll give folks an opportunity to tune in next time. Thank you so
Yes.
much for joining us, for joining ISACA and One in Tech, and me, especially my best good ISACA friend,
Thank you.
for this conversation, and for our listening and watching audience out there. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a good day.
Bye now.